everybody, I'm Natalia Bonner, and I have this really fun kind of scallop border design to share with you today. So I'm calling it a scallop border design, even though it has straight lines and it's more geometric than a traditional scallop. But I've got feathers quilted in here and other fun elements. This is just a really fun design, and I really hope to inspire each of you on your own machine quilting journey. Now, if you like what you see with this super cute scallop border design, make sure you do check out my online class, Let's Stitch Scallop Borders. So this is just one design, but in my online class, I actually teach you 10 different scallop border designs, places that you can quilt those large and small designs. So you will need a few products to stitch out these designs. The scallop that I'm going to be quilting today, I am actually stitching on a pre-printed panel that's available for purchase through Honest Fabric, and I have a link below where you can check that out. I'm going to be doing all of my stitching using so fine thread on the top, bottom line thread on my bobbin. The batting that I'm using here is 1 layer of Quilter Stream Poly Deluxe. Got all these products available for purchase over on my website, pieceandquilt.com. The quilting that I'm going to be doing here, I am quilting on my Gamel 22-inch machine, and I am stitching in the stitch regulated mode. Now, in order to stitch out this design, you do need to have a little bit of basic knowledge about machine quilting with rulers. I do have a video that talks about that. Again, I'll leave a link below where you can check that out, and then you can get stitching. I'll start out by measuring the inside of this border. Measuring across the inside of this border measures 18 inches. So because it is a number that's divisible by 2, I am going to stitch this whole design based on 2-inch increments. Now, if your border was maybe 18.5 or something like that, something slightly different from what mine is, just simply adjust. So maybe I'm going to make my increments instead of every 2 inches, maybe like 2 1/8. The increments are so small with something like this that nobody is ever going to notice if it's slightly off a little bit. Okay, so you'll see here that I am going through and marking actually straight lines. With a design like this, because there are going to be markings on the bottom and the top, sometimes I'll mark a straight line all the way through, just to help so that I don't ever get confused of where I'm going to be stitching through. So I'll mark all the way across every 2 inches. After I've done that, mark the 2-inch increments, then I am going to go back through and mark the top center point on each one of those units. So the center is every 1 inch. I'm going to make just a little mark at the top of each of those blocks. Now I'm ready to begin stitching. Begin stitching at the lowest point on the left-hand side of my quilt, because this is done on my Gamel long arm machine. So I'll begin stitching at the lowest point that my throat space will allow me. I'm going to stitch a triangle going from that lower point up to the top of my border design. However, notice here that I am lining my 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler up so that it's intersecting that top center point. By doing that and holding the ruler so that it's actually intersecting that top center point, it'll make it so that when I go back through and add an echo line, the echo line will bump right up against the top side of my border. I'll continue stitching, working all the way across my quilt top side of my border from left to right until I've stitched that first triangle scallop design. Once I work all the way across my design, I'm now over at the right-hand side of my border. Because this border is a little bit smaller border design, I am actually going to now stitch back across from right to left. However, on most quilts, I'll stop, clip my threads, come back to the left-hand side, and then work my way from left to right again. But with this one, you can see that I'm going to stitch an echo that's 1/4 inch on the outside of that scalloped geometric scallop line is what we'll call it. So I'm adding that echo line. By doing that, I place the 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler so it's right on top of my previous stitch line. because I do have a ruler foot here on my machine. It's keeping my needle position, so it's about 1/4 of an inch away from my previous stitch line. By doing this, I'm able to stitch these zigzag scallop lines without a whole lot of marking, just a few reference points. Now, I like heavy quilting and I like to add a lot of detail with my machine quilting. So even though starting out with these triangles makes this design feel like maybe it's a little bit more modern, I really personally think that you can mix modern and more traditional quilting together. So in the inside of each of these little triangles, I am now going to stitch a fun little feather motif. So I'll start in the center by stitching just a center feather in there from the bottom up to the top. Then from there, I'll use the bump back method and stitch a couple, maybe 3 of those feathers on the right side, and then I'll repeat that process on the left side. From there, I'll continue working my way across the bottom of that border design, filling in each of those triangles with that fun feather motif. Now you could really stitch any filler that you wanted in here. If you wanted something more geometric and keep this kind of with the modern feel, then go for something more straight lined. But if you want to play around and have fun mixing the different techniques and types, add a little feather in there. After I've stitched all those feathers, now I'm going to stitch some pebbles on the outside of that border design. Now, again, I love really heavy quilting, so that's why I'm going to add more heavy quilting to the outside. But I also like just the different textures that it can create from the inside of that design and really make it so now those feathers and the geometric scallop really become the focal. So to stitch pebbles, I just work in a simple over-under type manner, working my way around my design. I do try to alternate the size of my pebbles. I feel like it creates a little bit more interest. After I finish quilting all those adorable pebbles, then I'm going to use my misting spray bottle and spritz away those blue marked lines.